Welcome to Bold Talk series where creativity, leadership, ideas, innovation come together. My name is Ludvik, and today I have a privilege to have a short one-on-one conversation with Joe Meyer, founder and CEO at ExecThread. Joe, great seeing you. Welcome to our Bold Talk series. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Epi. I really appreciate it and look forward to the chat.
Well, fantastic, Joe. Always great seeing you. For people who are not familiar with the ExecThread, give us an overview of what ExecThread is and what motivated you to start the company.
Yeah, ExecThread, which just reached its 10-year anniversary this past Wednesday, has a very, thank you, has a very simple but compelling value proposition. Anyone who has ever tried to find a job at the executive level, VP through C-suite, knows that it's quite challenging because the majority of those job opportunities are being worked on by executive search firms that don't make their searches readily accessible or available. ExecThread has figured out how to aggregate and represent thousands of executive searches being worked on by retained executive search firms back to our members. It's an 800,000 member community at this point. Over 800,000 registered members are part of ExecThread, and they join ExecThread to gain access to career advancing exec level jobs that are not posted on the Indeeds or LinkedIn's of the world.
Nice. Now, what motivated you to start the ExecThread, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I was getting approached by executive recruiters quite a bit. My last two companies have been acquired by AOL and Apple, respectively. I spent some time at eBay before that. So even though I'm an entrepreneur, I consider myself a entrepreneurial operator because I actually run these companies and then join the companies that acquire them and continue to run them. So I get approached by executive recruiters, and prior to the start of this company, I was getting approached by executive recruiters for job opportunities I actually wasn't even interested in. And I was curious as to what other opportunities those executive search firms had that they were working on, and they wouldn't let me know what other opportunities they were working on. They just wanted to talk to me about that one opportunity that they approached me for. And I said to myself, this seems kind of ridiculous, in this day and age where everything is open and transparent and walled garden industries are coming down. There should be more access in this executive search space, and candidates should have more knowledge and have the ability to find out about more of these so-called confidential searches. So I just set out to solve that simple problem. It was a problem that I thought had a lot of demand, and it does. And I also thought it wouldn't have a lot of competition because it's not the sexiest sort of, value prop. And most startups are founded by 20, 30-year-old, kids in the tech space who don't even know what executive search is. So I thought we would have a compelling value prop solving a real world problem with not a ton of competition. And that's exactly what's turned out to be the case.
Nice. So obviously you're solving this problem for executives.
And aspiring executives. There's
And
many more
aspiring.
aspiring executives than current
Yeah,
executives.
yeah. And obviously the recruiters are the ones who are pretty much I would say making sure that they are having their hands on in these jobs.
Searches. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. What do you think the percentage is like? Is it very high? Is like all of them, or is it 90%, 80%, or
So you're saying the percent of total exec level
jobs?
job
Yeah,
opportunities that are being worked on by search firms?
yeah.
It's definitely 50 or more percent.
Oh, wow, wow.
Yeah, well, just one thing about the executive search industry is that there's no barriers to entry to become an executive search firm or an executive recruiter. It's not like real estate where you have to get credentialed to become a real estate agent or anything like that. You or I could set up a shop tomorrow and put up a shingle and call it Epi Ludvik, recruiting firm. And that's how many of these recruiting firms start. And when I say there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of executive search firms and recruiting firms out there, I'm not lying. And therefore, they're all working on different, VP through C-suite searches, and the vast majority of them are not making it to the job boards. And then the other unique value prop of ExecThread is for every search that we post onto ExecThread, we also let you find out who the recruiter or recruiters are working on that search, their contact information, their LinkedIn profile. We let you know who the hiring manager is overseeing that search, LinkedIn profile, contact information. And we also let you know the recruiting firm that's working on that search. As you know, finding jobs at this level of the food chain is often not only about discovery of the job, which is a problem we're solving, but also about networking. So we encourage all of our members to find shared connections to the gatekeeper, who is the recruiter, and to the decision maker, who is the hiring manager.
Yeah, but do you think it's because the boards in these companies are the ones who are wanting to go this route, or is it because what do you think is the why is
Yeah,
that?
I mean, at the end of the day, as a hiring company, these are important roles you need to fill, and they're hard roles to fill. To find, to source, to screen, to vet, to interview, to refine, to narrow, all of that, and you need a white gloved managed service, professional services approach. So at the end of the day, these hiring companies are essentially outsourcing all of that heavy lifting to professional search firms, who are professional service providers. That's the primary reason they go and work with search firms. It's not to keep the job confidential.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Congratulations, 10 years anniversary.
Thank you.
I just saw your post on LinkedIn, and I thought it was a really good opportunity just to go over some of the things that you learn through this journey.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not my first rodeo. So I've learned these lessons a couple of times now. And every startup that you work on, whether you're the founder and or CEO of, is different, but they all have their unique set of challenges. And it's never a perfect linear, straight upward to the right road to success.
Yeah. Now, give us the viewers watching this this talk. Give us the three things that you pretty much you learned through the whole journey in the 10 years that if you knew it before, you would have done
Yeah,
better.
yeah. And my last startup was around 5 or 6, maybe 6 or 7 years old before it was acquired by Apple. And the startup before that was around 10 years old before it was acquired by AOL. So first off, startups don't magically turn into a success overnight. It's never, oh, you start with an idea and 2 years later you're going public. It's a long road. And while the timeline of most venture capital investors is to get to liquidity within 4 to 6 years, of making an investment. Oftentimes it takes 10 or more years for a startup to grow and evolve and scale and start scaling and finding its way. So you have to be patient. So one, it takes longer than you think. Two, because of that, you need a ton of perseverance and persistence and grit and thick skin and fortitude to make it through the peaks and valleys and the potholes along the way. And if you don't have that, you don't have a chance. And then that leads into the third thing, which is you will confront major obstacles more so than you've ever encountered as an employee at another company or as an executive at another company, as a founder, of a company that you start from the ground up. If you're lucky enough to get it past year 1 or year 5 or to year 10 or to that $1 million mark in revenue or that $10 million mark in revenue, which is, you're talking about 1% of 1% at this point. The potholes are coming. The obstacles are coming. You just don't know when they're coming or how deep they're going to be or what's causing them until you actually encounter them. And that's kind of my experience having done this a few times now. It doesn't make it any easier each time you do it, but you have perspective that the peaks and valleys and the potholes and the obstacles and the challenges are coming, and you just kind of mentally prepare yourself for it. even though you can't forecast when they're going to come or what's causing them.
Yeah, yeah, we're talking about those uh, break points, right? In the you have this like in a startup world is like what you do basically, you know, from zero to a million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get from 1 million to a 5 million or so, like with who you're doing it or something. How important is for you uh, uh, leading the company with the right attitude, the right information team to innovate? And how do you define your leadership style?
Yeah, so I think there's two. That's a two-pronged question with both questions kind of highly correlated. So, um, first off, from an innovation perspective, at the end of the day, ExecThread's a tech startup. My last startup, HopStop, was a tech startup. My last startup before that, Quigo, was a tech startup. Um, but all three had something very similar, which is we found a niche, we penetrated that niche, and we kept at that penetration of that niche. Uh, and we just kept on uh, uh, persisting into that niche. Um, and it's the repetitiveness of it. It's the constant refinement of it. It's the constant, evolution of it. It's the constant uh, um, um, advancement of it that creates barriers to entry and ultimately innovation. Uh, Innovation, like most startups, don't happen doesn't happen overnight. It's the refinement of that initial kernel over the course of many years that really creates the differentiation and the barriers to entry. How that leads into my leadership style, I would say my leadership style has definitely evolved over the years. I'm no longer 23, 24 or 34. I'm 54. I just turned 54 last weekend, and I manage with uh, a much softer, more patient approach. Still very focused, still very driven, still very um, laser beam focused. But I don't let smaller things bother me as much anymore. I don't lose my patience as much anymore. I have a longer, rope with people. And I let people kind of figure out things on their own and make mistakes early on and until they kind of perfect what they do for us. And I only kind of take a more heavy-handed approach very, very rarely. And therefore, when I do, it's more impactful than, doing it uh, too frequently and unnecessarily.
Hmm. Well, you know, when you try new things, failure just around the corner. But you got to try new things in order to innovate. The entrepreneurship journey, it's ups and downs without any saying. What is your approach to failure when trying new things, and how do you get yourself up? I mean, I'm looking at your posts and like things that you've gone through, like you're going up and down to get to this point where you are. Not many entrepreneurs have that grit. You know, do you think it's a combination of things that make you have a different approach towards the failure?
Investors, the good ones, usually bet on the jockey more so than the idea or the concept. And if I were a venture investor, I would do the same thing because, like I said, no matter what the startup is, you're going to go through a ton of challenges along the way. And you need a leader who's going to be able to grind their way through that um, in as unemotional of a way as possible.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, though. And what I would say is that I have not continued to plod forward in spite of these obstacles, which are immense, because I am infatuated with my idea, or because I am, you know, have blinders on. Uh, each of my last two startups, which were long journeys with a ton of obstacles along the way, there was reason to keep believing. There was reason to keep optimistic. There was a ton of usage, a ton of engagement, a ton of positive reactions to what we were doing alongside the massive obstacles. And if it weren't for that, I would probably have given up earlier, because it would just be obstacles and challenges and no positive feedback, right? But I learned a long time ago that, especially when you run a B2C focused operation or platform like I have with ExecThread and HopStop before it, if you're not getting, uh, you shouldn't view negative feedback negatively or in a glass half empty sort of way. Negative feedback is good because you're getting feedback from your users that you can then take and refine and work on and improve. And if they didn't care about it, they wouldn't be providing you feedback. And if only people providing feedback were to pat you on the back and tell you how great you are, there's no room for improvement. So with my last two startups, in spite of the obstacles, we received a ton of feedback, a ton of engagement, and that has given us reason for optimism and has helped us, crawl out of holes and back into, periods of success.
Yeah. Well, that level of feedback from a customer is so important, but that requires a also a level of a listening, right? If you don't have a listening heart, it's very difficult to really bring all that information in. So how do you leverage this customer feedback to drive growth in a company?
And I would say it's not only about listening, it definitely is majorly about listening, but it's about not taking things personally. Some people who provide feedback are rather, um, uh,
Ashley?
you know, uh, you need to have thick skin. You need to not take things personally. You need not to get emotional about it. And it's easier said than done. It's almost not being human to be able to do that. But it's ability to listen and really kind of figure out what they're really saying beneath the emotion, beneath the anger, beneath the animosity, beneath the frustration. Um, that's harder than listening, in my opinion. But I've also have learned over the years that when your users, your members, whatever it is you call your customers, i.e., who you ultimately serve, um, when you're getting that feedback in bunches, meaning multiple people are saying the same thing or multiple people are saying something similar, that's where you need to focus versus kind of the outlier feedback that is just being offered up by one or two people.
Hmm. Yeah. So looking into that and looking also the patterns, right? What are the patterns of that information, that data that exists, that you can make a better decision uh,
Correct.
to take the next action. Joe, what does the word bold mean to you?
Could mean many different things in many different contexts, but if we're talking about startups and founding companies and leading and driving and scaling companies, it means having a vision and marching towards that vision with uh, an unyielding sense of commitment and passion, um, to achieve your bold vision and ambition.
And with that, Joe, thank you. Congrats to the 10-year anniversary for keeping that and
Thank you.
never giving up. Thank you for
And one
joining
thing
me.
I was just one thing real
Yeah.
quickly, Epi, is when we started ExecThread, it was a pure crowdsourcing platform. We've evolved, quite a bit beyond that, and you were one of those very first few people that kind of found us because you are big into the crowdsourcing space. So it was validating to find someone like you who did a lot in that crowdsourcing space early on, to know that, it was possible, if it could be applied in a different industry. So
Yeah.
I thank you for that.
No, thank you. Well, thanks for reminding me of that because I do also remember in that early days in a crowdsourcing world where it started picking up as a threat, as a trend, and the decision for me to just make that move from New York and go to Singapore and start there and establish from there, it was quite a big move for me
I'm
leaving
sure. I'm
behind.
sure.
So I'm glad I've done it. We're still grinding every single day, as
Hmm.
as most of the entrepreneurs are out there. And while you grind, as about, it's all about really waking up with an attitude that every day is going to be better. And as long as you focus on adding that one extra step towards the betterness, you'll get there. And again, like a focus is so important. That focus is really what kept me till to this day. So I truly appreciate that. And Joe, I wish you all the best in your next 10 years and looking in terms of the great things that you're doing in the work and the jobs and the executive searches. Congrats on all your achievements. Thank you for joining me, and look forward to seeing you soon. Until next time, take care, be great, and be bold always.
Thank you.